In every neighborhood, there's that one house people cross the street to avoid. On Maplewood Drive, it wasn't the house that scared everyone. It was the dog in front of it. A massive, slate-gray cane Corso named Diesel lay every afternoon behind an old iron fence, his broad chest rising and falling like some resting lion, his amber eyes following every movement with an unsettling calm. Kids yanked their bikes to the other side of the road when they saw him, parents pulled toddlers closer, and even delivery drivers learned to leave packages at the corner instead of walking up the driveway. Stories spread faster than truth ever could. Someone said Diesel had bitten a guy's arm clean through. Another swore he had taken down a grown man in seconds. Nobody could prove any of it, but nobody really tried. After all, those jaws, those muscles, that low rumbling growl he let out whenever someone got too close. It was easier to believe the worst and stay away than risk finding out who he really was. Only one person didn't act scared around Diesel. His owner, Mr. Thompson, the quiet widower who lived alone in the brick house with the peeling white trim. He was the kind of man who waved from the porch but never really stopped to talk. He walked slowly, favoring his right knee, and people whispered that he lived with that huge dog for protection. Whenever Diesel sat beside him, leaning that massive head into the man's side, it looked less like a security system and more like the only living soul Mr. Thompson trusted. Still, the neighborhood wasn't convinced. Every time Diesel barked, deep booming, vibrating the air, curtains twitched, blinds snapped shut, and group chats lit up with, "That dog is going to hurt someone one day. Just wait." On a warm Saturday evening, the kind that painted the sky in streaks of orange and lavender, the neighborhood felt almost peaceful. Sprinklers clicked softly on front lawns, the smell of someone's barbecue drifted through the air, and the usual hum of traffic had thinned out to a gentle backdrop. Diesel was in his spot, as always, stretched out by the fence, his giant paws tucked underneath him, ears perked just enough to listen without moving. His tail occasionally gave a single, lazy thump when Mr. Thompson shuffled onto the porch with a glass of iced tea. Across the street, a group of parents sat on lawn chairs talking about school, bills, and the endless rise of prices, half watching their kids chalk hopscotch patterns on the cracked sidewalk. Life on Maplewood felt ordinary, and in ordinary moments, people forget how quickly everything can change. Down at the far end of the street, a teenager walked alone with their headphones on and their backpack slung over one shoulder. This was Jamie, tall for their age, a little awkward in the way teenagers often are, still figuring out how to move through the world without tripping over it. Jamie had been in the neighborhood for years, but unlike the younger kids, they didn't run or scream when passing Diesel's house. They didn't tempt fate either. They just kept a respectful distance, pretending not to notice the enormous dog watching from behind the fence. Today, though, Jamie wasn't really paying attention to anything. The music in their ears drummed louder than the world around them, drowning out the sound of tires on asphalt, drowning out the faint rumble growing behind them, drowning out everything except whatever lyrics were currently filling the empty spaces of a teenage mind. At the same time, a delivery van turned onto Maplewood, the driver glancing down at his phone for an address, one elbow resting casually on the open driver's side window. He had already had a long day, too many stops, too many stairs, and not enough breaks. He didn't see the basketball rolling lazily off the curb, didn't see the little boy chasing it, and he certainly didn't see how close he was drifting toward the parked cars lining the street. All it took was a moment, 1 second of distraction, one tilt of the steering wheel, and the van veered a little too far to the right. Jamie, lost in their music, stepped off the curb to cross, not realizing that the usual safety of this quiet street had vanished in that instant. 1 foot down, another step forward. The van's engine louder now, but still muffled by the song in their ears. None of the parents had noticed yet. The boy who lost his ball had frozen, unsure whether to run forward or back. Maplewood paused on a knife's edge. Diesel noticed. The dog's head snapped up. His ears rose, his eyes sharpened, and his huge body tensed. To him, the world was a constant stream of smells, vibrations, and tiny shifts in energy, and something about the way the van's engine roared and the way Jamie's steps cut through the air set off alarms deep inside him. He watched the line connecting all of them, the rolling ball, the frozen child, the distracted driver, the teenager walking blindly into danger, and some ancient instinct flared to life. His lips pulled back just enough for a low growl to rumble in his chest, something only Mr. Thompson recognized as a warning. The old man followed his dog's gaze, squinting past the late sunlight, and his breath caught as he understood what Diesel had already seen. In a flash, Diesel was no longer the lazy statue by the fence. The massive cane Corso surged to his feet, muscles coiling with sudden purpose. The iron fence rattled as his shoulder brushed against it, his paws digging into the ground as he tracked the van's momentum and Jamie's careless steps. The parents across the street saw it first, the giant dog suddenly rising, ears pinned forward, body tense like a coiled spring, and panic flooded their faces. Someone gasped. Someone else shouted without thinking, "He's going for the kid!" A mother grabbed her toddler and yanked them backward, eyes wide, heart racing, every rumor she'd ever heard about Diesel exploding to the surface all at once. To everyone watching, it looked like the moment they'd always feared was finally here. The dangerous cane Corso had locked onto a target. Jamie took another step, finally starting to cross the street, one foot hovering over the asphalt just as the van, now drifting too fast and too close, bore down on the intersection. Time seemed to slow. Diesel's chest expanded with a deep, booming bark that shook the air like thunder, a sound so loud, so startling, that it cut through the music in Jamie's headphones and snapped several heads around all at once. The neighbors flinched. The little boy at the curb clamped his hands over his ears. And in that frozen heartbeat, as the enormous dog launched himself toward the fence with terrifying speed, every single person on Maplewood Drive thought the same thing. This is it. That dog is about to do something terrible. They were wrong. And what Diesel did next would shock every single one of them. For a split second, Maplewood Drive existed inside a single sound, Diesel's bark. It ricocheted off mailboxes and porch railings, tore through the music in Jamie's ears, and sent a shockwave of pure adrenaline through every adult watching. The van's driver jolted, his eyes finally snapping up from his phone, but he was already too close, already drifting, already committed to a path that would carry him straight through the crosswalk where Jamie had just stepped. The teenager froze, disoriented, yanked out of their thoughts by the sudden roar of a dog that, as far as they knew, had never done anything but glower at people from behind a fence. They turned their head toward the sound, not toward the danger, and that tiny delay stole the precious half-second they needed to recognize the van bearing down on them. Diesel exploded into motion. The metal fence, which had always looked so solid, rattled violently as his huge frame slammed against it. To the neighbors, it was the nightmare they'd always pictured, a giant, aggressive dog hurling himself at the bars, teeth bared, eyes blazing. But this time, the old iron bolts at the bottom of the gate, rusted, weathered, silently weakening over the years, met more force than they'd ever been asked to withstand. One bolt snapped. Then another. With a tortured screech, the gate lurched forward. The sound shot through the quiet evening, metal grinding on concrete, as Diesel shoved his entire weight into it. For a heartbeat, it held. Then, with a deafening clang, the gate crashed open. Every parent on the opposite sidewalk screamed at once. Someone yelled, "Jamie, run!" Another shouted, "That dog's loose!" A father dropped his drink and sprinted without thinking, feet pounding against the pavement as his mind tried to decide which danger was worse, the out-of-control van or the 150-pound cane Corso charging straight at a teenager. Even Mr. Thompson felt a flicker of fear. He'd never seen Diesel break out like that, never seen that kind of wild determination in his dog's eyes. But beneath the fear was something else, a quiet, unwavering trust. Diesel wasn't just reacting. He was choosing. The van's tires screeched as the driver slammed on his brakes, but momentum and gravity didn't care how sorry he suddenly was. The vehicle slid forward, rubber burning against asphalt, leaving a dark streak behind it. Jamie finally turned toward the van, eyes widening, body frozen like a deer in headlights, instincts colliding with disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen here, on their calm suburban street. This was the kind of thing you saw in viral videos, not in real life. A million thoughts tried to rush through their brain at once, but none of them made it past the single, heavy realization: I can't move fast enough. Diesel could. He hit the street like a freight train, claws scratching sparks from the pavement as he cut across the yard and launched himself between Jamie and the van in one impossible, heart-stopping movement. There was no hesitation, no fear in his eyes, just an animal's pure, instinctive decision. This one is mine to protect. His shoulder crashed into Jamie's legs with brutal force, knocking the teenager sideways so hard they flew out of the van's path, tumbling across the asphalt, backpack skidding one way, headphones the other. The impact knocked the air from Jamie's lungs, leaving them gasping on the ground, scraped and shaken but suddenly, unmistakably, alive and out of the van's trajectory. Diesel wasn't. The van clipped him. Not a full impact. The driver had managed to slow just enough, but enough for the corner of the bumper to slam into Diesel's side and send his massive body spinning. The sound it made, a heavy, sickening thud, silenced the street in an instant. The van shuddered to a stop, half-mounted on the curb, the driver's hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. His face drained of color as he stared at the huge dog now lying motionless on the road. Parents who had spent years complaining about Diesel's dangerous presence were suddenly running, not away from him, but toward him. Someone called 911. Someone else yelled for a towel. The little boy who'd chased his basketball stood in the middle of the sidewalk crying, his toy forgotten completely. Jamie tried to sit up, every part of their body protesting, but adrenaline overrode the pain. They turned and saw Diesel lying on his side, chest heaving, one hind leg twitching as if his body was still trying to run even though the moment had already passed. His eyes were open, gaze flickering between the van, the teenager he'd pushed to safety, and the trembling shape of Mr. Thompson hobbling down the porch steps as fast as his bad knee would allow. The old man dropped to his knees beside Diesel, one hand on the dog's neck, the other stroking his head as if he were calming a child after a bad dream. "I've got you, boy," Mr. Thompson whispered, his voice raw and shaking. "You did good, Diesel. You did real good." Jamie crawled closer, tears blurring their vision, their heart pounding with guilt and gratitude all tangled together. Minutes earlier, they had barely given the dog a passing glance. Now they were staring into the eyes of the animal that had just thrown himself in front of a moving vehicle to save them. He saved me," Jamie choked out, the words tumbling out before they could stop them. "He pushed me away. I didn't even see the van. He did." The driver stumbled out of the vehicle, mumbling apologies, hands shaking. But every pair of eyes on Maplewood Drive was fixed on Diesel. The paramedics arrived first, sirens wailing, lights strobing red and blue against the brick houses. They checked Jamie, gently prodding for broken bones, asking questions about dizziness and vision. Jamie answered mechanically, eyes constantly drifting back to the vet truck that had pulled up beside the ambulance. The emergency vet team, called in by one quick-thinking neighbor who happened to have their number, moved quickly but softly, speaking to Diesel as if he could understand every word. They slid a stretcher underneath him, carried his heavy body with surprising ease, and loaded him into the back of their vehicle. As they were closing the doors, Diesel lifted his head just enough to look back at the crowd. His eyes found Jamie's for a single, unforgettable moment. It was not the look of a monster. It was the look of a guardian checking to make sure their job was done. For the first time since he'd moved in years ago, Mr. Thompson wasn't just the quiet man with a scary dog. He was a frightened, vulnerable neighbor whose best friend was fighting for his life. When the vet asked if anyone wanted to ride along, Jamie's voice cut through before their parents could answer. "I'll go," they said. "I need to. He saved me." Their mother nodded, eyes wet, and squeezed their shoulder. "Go," she whispered, "and thank him for all of us." Hours passed in the waiting room, ticking by with the slow, cruel patience of hospital clocks. The smells of antiseptic and coffee hung in the air. Mr. Thompson sat hunched forward, Diesel's collar clutched in his hands like some kind of talisman. Jamie sat beside him, arms wrapped around themselves, a bandage on their elbow, a bruise spreading along their cheekbone where they'd hit the ground. They spoke only in small bursts at first, about school, about dogs they'd known, about how they'd always been a little scared of Diesel but never really knew why. At one point, Jamie finally asked the question that had been sitting on their tongue all night. Why did everyone think he was dangerous? Mr. Thompson sighed, the sound heavy with years of unanswered rumors. "He's big," he said simply. "He's loud. He looks like trouble. People see a dog like him, and they fill in the blanks with their worst fears. But you know what he's done his whole life. Protected. Me, this house. The mailman when a stray tried to bite him once. He's never hurt anyone. Not once." He glanced at Jamie, eyes shining. Tonight just showed who he always was. Not a monster. A guardian. When the vet finally walked out, everyone in the room stood up at once. The woman's face was tired but warm. "He's a tough boy," she said, and the entire room exhaled in one shared breath. Bruised ribs, a dislocated shoulder, some internal bruising we'll keep an eye on. But no fractures. No life-threatening damage. It could have been much worse. She paused, smiling softly. "Honestly, if he hadn't been as strong as he is, we might be having a very different conversation. He took the hit that was meant for someone else." She didn't need to say who. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than any rumor ever had. By the next day, Maplewood Drive looked different. There were handmade, "Get Well" Diesel signs taped to mailboxes. A box of treats and toys appeared on Mr. Thompson's porch with a card that simply read, "To our hero." Parents who had once crossed the street now walked directly up to the house, asking for updates, offering rides, meals, and help with vet bills. The little boy who had chased his basketball drew a picture of Diesel with a cape and gave it to Jamie, who taped it above their desk. When Diesel finally came home days later, moving slowly but proudly, wearing a cone and a few shaved patches where the vets had worked, the entire block seemed to hold its breath. He stepped out of the car, sniffed the air, and wagged his tail just once. Slow, steady, unmistakable. Kids clapped. Adults smiled. Someone whispered, "There he is," like they were welcoming home a soldier from a quiet, personal war. Jamie walked up, heart racing, and gently placed a hand on Diesel's broad head. "Hey, big guy," they murmured. "Thank you." Diesel leaned into their touch, closing his eyes for a moment as if accepting the words without needing to understand the language. To him, it was simple. Danger had appeared, and someone he had decided was part of his world had been in its path. His job was to step in. And he had. From that day on, people stopped crossing the street when they walked past Mr. Thompson's house. They crossed toward it. Kids asked if they could pet Diesel, after asking permission, of course. Parents told the story again and again, how the dog everyone feared had saved a teenager's life without thinking twice. The myths and whispers that had once defined him were replaced with something truer, something earned. Diesel wasn't the dangerous cane Corso anymore. He was the 150-pound hero of Maplewood Drive. And every afternoon, when the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the street, Diesel lay behind a repaired gate, head resting on his paws, watching the world with those steady amber eyes. People still felt something in their chest when they walked past him. But now, it wasn't fear. It was respect, and a quiet, humbled awe at what a dangerous dog had done when it mattered most.